listening to Saturday Breakfast here on 720 ABC Perth. It's time to catch up with our forensic and clinical psychologist, Kirstin Bouse. And this week, it's an issue close to my heart, dealing with the daily bombardment of negativity in the media. Is it affecting us? And how do we deal with it? Kirstin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Tracy.
This is a topic that is good for all of us to talk about. Myself as a journalist, plenty of viewers out there, young viewers as well. How does it really affect us in society, in the community?
Well, I think we are seeing so much more negativity in the news and negative news stories, and we just, like everything with our social media, it means that it's kind of everywhere and on every device. It is having an impact on us. I mean, the rates of anxiety are probably higher than they were, say, 15 years ago or more. And, I think there's growing research to suggest that might be playing a role in the increase of anxiety in our community.
Yeah, how much of an impact is this to a person's own temperament or personality?
Yeah, look, I think, temperament and personality certainly has an impact on how you're affected by this constant stream of negativity in the news. But, for some people, it's really bringing a wariness of the world. It's really bringing a weariness and a sense that the world is a pretty miserable and negative place. I know I'm laughing. It's not good.
No, but I guess there seems to be, as I know, because I present the news every day, there seems to be more bad than good.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my impression too. And I think that's one of the things, while we have all these means to stay connected to other parts of the world and even our own nation, one of the downsides is then it just means we've got more opportunity to get negative news stories, and we don't seem to actually really want to tune into the positive news stories quite as much.
Do you think that's actually the case? I will admit this. I hear a lot of people saying to me, "Can't we just have some good news? Why so much bad?"
Definitely. I think there's two reasons that's the case. I mean, I think we're interested. We do want to know what's going on in the world, and I think those kinds of stories are perhaps more controversial and interesting, and dare I say it, influence ratings and things. It's what we do want, but there's a flip side to it as well, or another side to it, in the sense that we're actually, in some ways, our brains are designed to look for negative information. It's called the negativity bias, and it's a bit of a primitive kind of thing that we've got going on in our brain, because we needed to be able to spot hazards and threats and things. So our brain is geared towards looking for threats so that we can ascertain how we're going to respond and, keep ourselves alive.
I suppose, let's bring it back to just real life. Is that, I guess, in a similar thing for people who love drama and all that sort of... Do you know what I mean? Like, there are people who hold it... You can let go of drama, but there are people who love the drama. Is that what you're saying in terms of we are always seeking that?
Well, there might be some other kinds of things at play, and my argument for that one would be temperament's very much at play for people who like a bit of drama. But it is definitely a neurological kind of basis to why we seek out negative information and why we kind of stay latched onto it, for sure.
Yeah. Well, you were speaking about anxiety. Is the anxiety around looking at negative news stories every day similar to what some professionals have to deal with day in, day out, such as police officers, doctors, other emergency crews?
Absolutely. There is this, I guess, condition called vicarious trauma, and that is when you're constantly exposed to trauma that other people are experiencing. It's not necessarily you being involved in the fatality on the roads, but you are one of the peripheral people that's, support people, emergency workers and all that kind of stuff. And it very much is, it's a reality for sure. We are affected by all this trauma that's going on in the world, and it can actually cause mental health issues for sure.
Is there a downside to constantly seeing the negative stuff on television.
Absolutely. A lot of the research shows that, just kind of almost immersing yourself in the news and having a news feed on constantly that is negative is actually going to impact your mental health. And so the flip side of that, obviously, is if you don't want it to affect you that way, then you need to learn how to turn the telly off.
What if you can't?
Yeah.
Because I need to.
Exactly. Well, in those instances, and I still think that this is a really good trick for the general public, I think it's really important for us to stay connected to good news stories and things that remind us of the goodness of the human spirit, things that make us feel safe. Because if you think about what's going on for you when you're watching all that negative news information, you are starting to feel unsafe. You are starting to doubt whether people are inherently good. And so then how you manage that is to make sure you stay connected with the opposite of those things.
Okay. I was saying to you, before you came in the studio, Kirstin, just as a journalist, I think I find it tougher as I get older to read certain stories or report on certain stories. Is that a normal thing? Or?
Yeah, look, I think age brings with it both wisdom and perhaps ideally some pragmatism in the sense that you can put it in a box and say, well, this isn't necessarily happening, in my family or in my home. But it actually at the same time also brings the perspective and the recognition that this could happen in your hometown or in your family. And so sometimes those are the things that elevate our anxiety as we get older. And I think life has more meaning and you're more connected and to the vulnerability that we have as people.
Yeah. Well, that's nice to know.
Yeah.
My empathy is growing, hopefully. What about for children, though? I've got plenty of friends and family, relatives of young children, and they just simply can't allow their children to watch it. But what's your opinion on that?
Look, I think I'm always a believer in taking into account two things, the child's age and the child's temperament. And, if I'm just thinking of my two youngest out of my four, my absolute youngest, who's 8, would probably be quite indifferent to the media. That's just his nature. He's pretty self-contained kind of chappy who thinks the world's a pretty good place.
That's a nice place to be.
It is a nice place to be. But my 10-year-old, so his older brother, is a little bit of a stress head, shall we say, and very empathic child. And so he is someone whose temperament does make my husband and I think twice about exposing him to too much in the media because he'd take it on. So that's how we manage it, and I think that's what parents need to do. But still keeping in mind that at the end of the day, just kind of overdosing any of us, including or especially our children, with negative news is really not smart at all. There is such a thing as too much.
Just too much. Vince from Maylands has messaged in, Kirstin. He says that he's disturbed by reports on sexual violence and the way that they are often explicitly described. I know in news sometimes it's just we do try and filter the wording that we use in those reports, but sometimes it's even just the way that it's said can have quite an impact.
Definitely. And I think the other thing that comes into play, and look, having worked in, corrective services for a long time early in my career and still having lots of friends in that world, that is as colleagues, I'll clarify that. One of the big things that made a difference for us was making sure that when we were reading material and hearing materials that we really tried not to create images in our head, because that was kind of took it to that level where it really disturbed us. And I think that's, some people are very quick to be able to do that. It's just their natural inclination. And they're the ones that are more likely to be disturbed by the material because they can really kind of imagine how it would unfold. And obviously those who can really put themselves in other people's shoes and take the perspective of victims, they're more susceptible to it as well.
Okay. So what would be your advice to strike the balance of this daily negativity?
I mean, I really think the balance is about knowing yourself in the sense of, watching the news as you normally would and getting a sense of how much is too much. As I said, watching the news in the morning or tuning into it in the morning and tuning into it in the night, that might be, manageable for you. That might be quite okay. And what might tip you over into having a really crappy day and being in a really negative frame of mind is if you're kind of tuning into it multiple times during the day. So I think that's the first thing, is really getting a sense of how much is too much for you. Then, of course, it's acting on that. So making sure you set that boundary and you don't tune into it any more than what's wise for you. And as I said to you before, connecting with things that make you feel safe, make you feel positive, all those kinds of activities and leisure pursuits and the people that you love and enjoy spending time with, they're really the way to just remind yourself. And when you're in their company, just really absorb how lovely it is to be in their company and how good life can actually be.
Yeah. And it can be.
It can be, for sure. And maybe
Life
we can
is
get
good.
some more good news stories as well.
That's it. Can you imagine having a channel that's just all good news stories?
Well, I can, and I think that's what people are trying to create. Yeah.
That's it. All right, Kirstin Bouse, it's always great having you here in the
Thanks so much.
studio and having your insights to all these wonderful issues. And thanks for, I guess, also making people aware of it as well, and it's good to talk about. But
You're welcome.
Kirstin Bouse, our forensic and clinical psychologist here.